The purpose of this tutorial is to explain how to add attributes to your model. So first off, attributes can only be added to item blocks, not value blocks, because attributes are basically data associated with each particular item. So the set block, that pushes values into an attribute. So when we go to open up the set block, you see that there's nothing in here as far as the properties, and there's nothing available. So we have to create a new, we're going to create a new value attribute. The attribute name has to follow normal computer science rules. That is, you can't start with any numbers and no special characters except for underscore. So now this has created a new attribute. In order to push an actual value into that we can type in a value from here, or we can have values that come from the connectors. So if we want to add more attributes at this point, we're going to need to expand the table. And we expand the table by clicking on the plus sign. And then we want to enter the total number. So the desired number of rows is not the number we're adding, but the total number that we want. So we want 2 rows total. Now we can add in a different attribute. Now notice we could pick the same attribute twice. I don't think we would want to do that. So we're going to add a new value attribute. Okay, so this gives us a second attribute. So now, if we look on the outside here, we'll see 2 connectors, a new attribute and another attribute. And we can hook those connectors up to a value block that pushes in the value that we want. So in this case, I'm going to use, it really doesn't matter. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab a random number block. So I'm going to generate a random number that goes into my second value attribute. The first value attribute is being hard-coded inside the block dialog. The second value attribute is being pushed in from outside. And so just keep in mind, if you put in anything into the dialogs or tables and you have a connector on the outside, the connector takes precedence and will override whatever you have inside there. Okay, now if we go down to our equation block, we'll see that the attributes that we already have are available to use. So we can change this connector to an attribute. And then we can choose either an existing attribute, or we can add a new attribute in the same way that we did before. And in the same way that we did before, we would need to expand the table to, if we wanted to add in another attribute. The attributes can now be used in the same way as normal variables. Now we can reset this value to be here like we would with just any other kind of variable. So anything that you see in this table up here, those are the variables coming from inside your model. This is similar. Remember, this is an equation block. So those lists of input and output variables are similar to a parameter list that you would have if you were calling some sort of a function in normal computer programming. So that's why you can use, similar to where if you had a function with some parameters, you can use the names of those parameters as variables inside your function. It works the same way for equation blocks. Now we can also put attributes on the output end if you want to. A word of caution about attributes within the equation block. I can set this to 3, but that only is a local decision. If I want that value of that attribute to stick as I go through, I have to actually set it on both the input and the output side. Otherwise, the value of that will not stick regardless of what I put into the equation. So now I'm going to push my test equation. I see nothing happening, so everything's good. And now my model is ready to run. And that ends the tutorial.